edition of Landline. Today on the show, the latest news, a most comprehensive...
The ABC had a rural program called Countrywide, and it wasn't quite working because I think it was a city program made for, or a country program made for city people, and I wanted to make a country program for country people. So when Countrywide was dumped, they gave us about 1/5 of its budget and said start a daily program, and we did.
Harvest time in Australia's grainlands, and the big job's been done. The crop's up, and the headers are in the fields.
But it was the content. We didn't have the content, and that was the real struggle. And that's why I lobbied Sydney. I said, listen, we've got to do something about this. Either this closes down or you make us into a weekly program.
Good afternoon. I'm Catherine Phillips, and welcome to the first Sunday Landline. I was the first presenter of Landline when it became an hour-long program on a Sunday. And I'd had a chance meeting with Kerry Lonergan in a coffee shop when he told me he was looking for a host, and he was having a lot of trouble because no one knew the difference between a heifer and a hereford, and it gave me the idea to apply. And in my audition tape I said that I knew the difference between a heifer and a hereford, which could be one and the same, but I also knew what a hogget was as well, and that got it over the line.
Land clearing in the West has created an environmental disaster.
When I started in the early 90s, agriculture was pretty much seen by the mainstream community as being quite destructive of the environment, and that farmers didn't care. They just wanted to take what they could from the land, do whatever they wanted to the land in order to make a buck, which is not true. As a result, we did many stories on Landline which were about those early pioneers. Tree planting became John's weekend hobby. Then that hobby became an obsession. John Fenton was an early adopter like I have never seen. He threw himself into planting trees, and he did it for 40 years. And by the time we went to film, it was windswept to almost like an English park. He completely changed the environment on his property. I thought Mr. Darcy was going to pop by on a hunter and ask me to the ball. He was widely ridiculed in his region. His kids got teased at school because your dad's crazy.
I didn't care. I don't, and I care a damn sight less now.
And he ended up being a superstar of regenerative agriculture. So when we do stories like that, or about regenerative agriculture, which can be like throwing a match, into a bonfire, because it can be controversial, and we do those stories and often get criticised for being greeny and being woke, and it's like, mate, we were doing this in 1991 and no one came up with the term woke in 1991. Landline tackled lots of issues that even mainstream media wasn't really tackling at the time, which were to do with the environment and to do with the climate, because let's face it, that rules everything if you're a farmer.
Although the fine details have to be worked out, it's planned that carbon credits will be traded inside countries from one company to another, and from one country to another. To put it simply, carbon polluters would pay tree planters to fix their problem.
Kerry Lonergan commissioned stories that really looked in depth at what carbon pricing, what carbon farming meant. I mean, this was in the 1990s. That they weren't common phrases then.
One of the enlightening moments in creating a one-hour program for journalism, when Peter Lewis went out to the other side of Dalby and did a 18-minute story on tramlining.
This paddock and this property are part of a revolution that's sweeping across Australian agriculture. It's called controlled traffic, tramlining, or farming the straight and narrow.
The real effect was the effect on the soil and the crop, and on the profitability and sustainability of agriculture.
Well, not a great deal happens on tramlining once you go up and down the paddock 3 or 4 times, but he succeeded in making an 18-minute story out of tramlining, which was almost a seminal moment in Landline's establishment because people watched it.
Out here on the edge of the Simpson Desert, you feel like you're a million miles from anywhere.
Travelling in regional Australia, as you know, is very, very expensive. We had a real struggle for the first couple of years getting a program together. We had a real struggle.
It was frantic. I have never worked so hard, and the great fear, which you never have when you work in TV news, is we could go to black. Books have always been popular in the bush, and Kerry Lonergan has been catching up on some reading.
I decided the only way we could sustain it was to fill it up with some freebie stuff.
Next two is yabbies for fun, fishing and farming. A lot of us might not ever consider that yabbies might be fun, but there's a book about it at least.
Once it became known that we were reviewing books and magazines, they would send us a pile of stuff.
Next up is Volume 1 in a series on horse sense and safety. There's even a chapter on right and left-handed horses, which I'm very much looking forward to reading.
People loved it because I'd put the publisher's name on there and pretend to read it and give it a glowing report. We wouldn't review a book unless it was glowing.
We would do cooking segments that might run 5 to 10 minutes.
Yes, you can actually eat quite well for about $1 a meal, and I think many of us are going to have to learn how to do that.
Jan Power, who was quite a chef and a woman who established farmers markets, she cooked a meal with noodles and vegetables, and it was meant to cost $1, and it did.
Wonderful. Now, you can't tell me that that isn't a very highly nutritious, cheap, wonderful, delicious meal for just $1.
And I ran into somebody at some function and I went, oh, come on, Kath. No one's ever going to eat noodles and vegetables.
G'day, this is Becky Cole, and for 30 years Australians have been linked to the Aussie bush thanks to Landline. I did my first ever film clip with Landline in 1993, so happy birthday, Landline.
Some people like an hour and the money. We used to finish the program with music videos, which were all mostly American videos, and the audience loved it though. But they were asking for Australian artists, and Australian artists didn't make enough money to shoot a video clip. So Kerry had the idea that, well, we'd just make them ourselves.
Sitting on my daddy's knee on the front porch of home. Puts me on the floor to answer the phone. It was his biggest countdown to us, so we were just really, really thrilled. And to get the opportunity to make a clip on Landline, I thought I was like king of the hill. I couldn't believe it. And my girlfriend at the time, who ended up being my wife, was like the love interest, twirling around on the road in a floral dress, and she looked gorgeous. And it was just a really, really special clip. We're the boys from the bush and we're back in town.
It was a huge boost for all us country artists trying to get going and get exposure. And Landline did videos for me for my first 3 albums. We smashed it out in an afternoon. There was a couple of locations like the country road, the paddock and the pub. As the song goes, you know, the dog's in the back and the foot goes down. So we had this blue heeler and the boys come hightailing it down this dirt road, and suddenly somebody said, "Where's the dog?" And the dog, he'd fallen out. Sorry, I'm going to get in trouble for this. But anyway, a few minutes later, here he comes running down the road, a little bit of blood, nothing to worry about. He's a blue heeler.
Happy 30th birthday, Landline. What would Sundays be for so many of us without thinking, oh, it's lunchtime. Got to head in, grab a cuppa, sit back and connect with our incredible farmers and learn about so many different things.
Wishing Pip and all the team at Landline a happy 30th birthday.
You've absolutely given us something to aim for now. Think we can make it? Happy anniversary, team.
Wherever we go, on the back roads, like at this cab draft, people come up to us and say how much they enjoy Landline, as they should, and that the ABC is showcasing regional Australia. So, you know, you're only spring chickens, really. Keep up the good work, and long may the show continue.
Wool is one of my weaknesses, yes, or passions. I spent a lot of time in wool sheds as a kid. I've written a couple of books about wool sheds. So over the time, of course, we featured many boom and bust industries, and wool had an extraordinary boom in the late 80s, and in 1991, a spectacular crash, the most spectacular corporate crash in Australian history. That'll do. Oh, don't take that.
Currently, most wool growers would look with envy at the national poverty line of $330 a week for a family of 4. This year, the average annual farm income for wool is $2,000, down 90% on the previous season.
It was a hell of a mess. It took years and years. It was probably 25 years before people came back into sheep and wool in many cases.
Let's bring you back, that's it.
But having said that, out of that calamity came, I suppose, realisation that wool is a great product, but it has to be done right.
Merino wool's our hero, and if they don't know that, we've got to really scream it quite loud. And the lamb's cute. We love to tell our story of, triumph, I guess, over tough times.
There's other spectacular crashes. I guess one that would come to mind would be ostriches. Ostriches were, in the 90s, seen as this extraordinary business opportunity.
This plane load of eagerly awaited African black ostriches is worth $5 million.
42,000 on the back row, 42,000. $42,000 you go.
It was just an insane rise in prices when there was no apparent market for the meat.
42,000 quarter.
We went to a property where they had breeding pairs and they cost $100,000 each. And you just couldn't work out who's buying the end product.
They're the biggest birds in the world, and depending at what stage in the last 10 years you decided to invest in them, you'll either see an ostrich as a golden goose or a financial albatross.
It's been an absolute financial disaster. There obviously may be people out there who've done well out of it. I wish them well. But I wish like hell I'd never seen an ostrich in my life.
It's very easy in Australian agriculture to look at failures. There's always someone going out backwards through misfortune or bad management. But the show's also always been very focused on innovation and positive stories. Market day at Wagga Wagga in southern New South Wales. In the pre-dawn bustle, the last of 4,000 sheep and lambs are penned up, ready for auction. Lamb's a pretty amazing one. Lamb used to be just a bit of a pocket money exercise for wool growers. But then from the 1990s onwards, it became really a sought-after product.
The lamb market's never been as hot, and neither is the mutton market. We're seeing levels we haven't seen before, and, trying to deal with it.
You don't mind me using figures, but look at that. How's that for lamb?
When I started a decade ago, I actually thought I'd struggle to find stories because I wasn't off the land. But it has been the complete opposite. There are so many stories out there, and people farm the weirdest things.
This is one of the most delicate businesses of all, butterfly farming.
Here is the Thai cobra.
It's the only snake venom farm, if you could call it that, of its size in Australia.
This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. You have to be passionate.
See where you fell in love with it to begin with.
I love the sound. You can come down here, then the wind comes up and the bamboo starts to talk to you. It's got a language of its own. So you just stand there and listen. It's absolutely brilliant.
It is the people and their passion for what they do that, for me, makes the job fascinating. What makes them tick? Why do they invest their life savings in this idea? Look at Tony Parr, the guy who makes pickles for Macca's Burgers. There is a boom, bust, recovery story.
At our peak, we were worth 16 mil when we lost a lot. You can't sit down and say, gee, poor me, or I can't make a buck because this doesn't work. You've got to get into it and go, well, what can I do to make it work?
Happy 30th birthday, Landline. I have always been an avid watcher, including throughout my professional rugby league career. A funny story from those days, obviously Landline was on a Sunday. Some of the biggest matches in my career for the Broncos were Sunday grand finals. My roommate, Brad Thorne, was not a country boy and found it interesting that on the biggest days of our footy career, I insisted that Landline be watched.
I love Landline for a number of reasons. I guess firstly because it's a practical tool and a reference point for people in regional and rural Australia. It's a terrific current affairs and a human interest program.
just love the country, love cattle stations, love the outback.
I love it. Like, yeah, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world. Very simple life out here. You get up, you go to work, you have a feed, you go to bed. Like, no humbug, no worries, nothing. Like, I wouldn't be anywhere else.
It just gets hold of you and you come to love it. The dust, the flies, the dirt, the whole deal. It becomes a part of you. One of the best parts is getting to the places that are really out of the way, very isolated, that most people don't get to see. And let's face it, that's what they tune into Landline to see. This is the most isolated cattle station in Australia, possibly even the world. Alice Springs is the closest big town, and that's 730 kilometres away. But the marvel about being at Superjack was that I really never felt less isolated in lots of ways because of the people who were there. This is the most resourceful and resilient bush dynasty you're ever likely to come across. But in September 2008, something happened which would dramatically change the life they knew.
I mean, it just started off like any usual muster, you know, the choppers got going early in the morning on daylight. And
the helicopter he was a passenger in dropped 200 feet out of the sky.
Other than having a broken neck, I really wasn't injured. There was, you know, I wasn't bleeding, I wasn't in a state of bother by no means. I just couldn't feel or move any part of my body.
Oh, the story about Rob Cook is the ultimate in coming back from adversity. He was basically told after he had the accident that he shouldn't live within any further than 20 k's from a major hospital, and he decided he was going to go back to the family farm, and he did. He started working out how he could bring in cattle while he was sitting in his wheelchair. He started thinking about automation and that sort of thing, because he's a very smart man. He didn't lose that capability. There was a moment when the sun was beginning to set and the children were, I'm going to get choked up, the children were hanging off the back of his wheelchair as he pulled this wheelchair up through the dust. He only had to use one hand to do it. And for me, that said everything. The most inspiring thing about doing these stories over so many years was seeing the tenacity of farmers, and the fact that year after year they roll the dice on yet another season and they don't know what's coming in that year.
I guess for all the technology, all the techniques, all the plans that farmers have, often Mother Nature comes storming through. This is what Cyclone Larry left behind. Just over a week ago, this was one of the best banana plantations in the Tully district. Now, the $3 million crop is in ruins.
We started this all a long time ago from nothing, and we built up to a quite sizable family enterprise, and now it's all laying on the dirt.
We were just confronted with 2 kilometres of 30-foot high wall of flame.
There is no sign of the crop left. There's nothing left but dirt.
Normally a fire doesn't burn the whole farm, but in this case it burnt our whole farm and a lot of other people's as well.
After a big bushfire, and we've covered a lot of them on the program, it is our job to go out there and show the impact that has on the local community, and it can be immense. And I think one of the things I find the most heartbreaking, even just to film, let alone go through, is when farmers have to, on top of all of that, go out and shoot their own injured livestock.
It's your worst nightmare. Absolutely. There's nothing more devastating than something that you've looked after all your life, and you've got to put them down.
Floods, you know, Northwest Queensland went through this terrible, terrible drought, and then there was this tropical storm
and it rained and it rained and it was cold, and all of those cattle that had managed to survive through the drought either were washed away by floodwaters or they died of exposure. And the people who had shepherded them through that drought then just watched their life's work be destroyed.
I love my cattle, so like this is really like my children, really. So, you know, it's pretty hard to sort of see this sort of stuff here. Yeah, pretty it's pretty hard to swallow. But anyway, we're tough, so you sort of just got to try and rebuild and get on with your life, I guess.
It often feels like there's a power imbalance when you're interviewing people straight after a disaster. They're still struck by what's happened. They're dealing with the shock of what's happened. Whereas to come back a year later when they've got things back on track, it's a more even conversation. North Queensland's banana industry is coming back to life. Paddocks which were flattened by Cyclone Larry are now bearing fruit.
At least we were cutting fruit, and you know, you were achieving, you felt like you were back in the game.
We're calling him fire resistant, this fellow, fire resistant. Hid in the creek and the flames went over the top of him. He's here to tell his story.
I'm always amazed that people give you their time and their trust when they're at their lowest. And I feel I owe it to them to go back and follow up and tell the rest of that chapter in their life.
I'm 72 in a few weeks, and it's been the toughest year of my life. We worked every day, continuously, for months and months and months, never had a day off for months.
All worth it?
Oh, it's been all worth it, yes. Yeah, I'd like to think that I'll never have to do it again, though.
I'm not going to let 1 year pull me out, change my mind. This is home.
That's Mother Nature, isn't it? She can't be controlled, but their devastation is our joy.
Caught a frog!
I'll be able to bring all my cattle in now to the river when this goes down, and it'll be, you know, it's a game changer.
Oh, mate, seriously though, this is travelling pretty fast.
One of the most spectacular stories I covered, and joyful stories, was when floodwaters up north reached drought-stricken properties in the outback. I mean, they transformed almost overnight.
It's like lifeblood. After so many years of looking at dry and stunted pasture and limited growth and cattle sort of going backwards, and this is just magnificent. This is like manna from heaven.
A dry riverbed is an unlikely spot for a cricket match. But in Western New South Wales, it's been very dry for a very long time. So the folk of the Lower Darling struck on an idea to try and lift their spirits.
How about we have a game, just so everybody can relax and just try and forget how dry, how monotonous the feeding's been. You know, everybody's a bit flat, so yeah, great idea.
Drought's been a recurring theme on Landline because we're not ever far from the next drought.
How bad does it get? You know, it's all gone. It's gone before our eyes, isn't it?
When I was there originally, we were right in the grip of that millennial drought.
This is the Ballon River.
I did that many stories up and down the Murray, and it was in those early days when we were looking at the balance between the environment right in the middle of this drought and irrigators.
No doubt the river is stressed in some places, but so are the farmers, irrigators and communities that live along it.
What I want to know from the government is, do they want us here or not? We're farmers, we're contractors, we're workers, we're out here, we're earning a decent dollar, we're paying plenty of tax, we're not asking for anything. Is that wrong?
Water, how it was used, when it was used, who had it, the politics of the Murray-Darling Basin at the time were overwhelming.
The stories are endless, and getting consensus is, well, I don't think I'm going to see it in my lifetime. It might take another 30 years. But it's awful to see how it rips communities apart, and I don't know how you solve it.
You've got the legacy of feral pigs. The
boulders are the front line for invasive management. Feral pigs are the enemy.
I've got the chainsaw in the back, I've got the ammo, and I've got poison, so let's go farming.
One of the biggest challenges for farmers is feral animals. And I have done a lot of stories on pests in my 25 years on Landline.
1 or 2 dogs can kill 50 or 60 sheep in a night.
I know they've been taking lambs flat out. I can't catch the dog. I don't know what to do.
I don't like seeing animals being, killed, shot, trapped, any of those things. There's certainly no bloodlust in it for me. It's more that I can see what impact pest animals have on landscape and enterprises. Rabbits. For nearly 2 centuries, Australia has been waging a war against these small, nocturnal vegetarians. Rabbits are a really interesting thing because they're these cute, fluffy little vegetarians which cause massive damage to the landscape and to wool-growing enterprises. They're not vicious, they don't attack you, but they can eat a place out of house and home. We've poisoned them on the ground and from the air. Their underground homes have been exploded and bulldozed, and we've infected them with deadly viruses. Rabbit. Still, they remain our most widespread and destructive pest.
We know they cost $200 million in losses every year. That affects what turns up on your plate. So rabbits are everybody's problem.
You're supposed to be resilient, you're supposed to be tough. I thought to myself, I'm supposed to be over this, and I just couldn't. I couldn't just get over it. I just wanted to run. I just wanted to go somewhere else, and I wanted to, but I couldn't.
Today, we hear from farmers who have battled the black dog and now have the courage to speak out. We know whether it's drought or prices falling or other challenges that there's a lot of mental health pressure on people on the land, and we thought, given our audience, that it was extremely important to have a look at that. It was a cycle of exhaustion, endless work and anxiety. John Sudos had no idea he was suffering from depression. He was so tired and so wound up, he was barely able to function. His uncle arrived just as he broke down.
He walked in the door and I just cried. I just broke down. And I just could not, that was the finish. I just said to him, look, I've got to go, I need help. And that was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At midnight, I was in a psychiatric hospital in Melbourne.
And we saw in the immediate aftermath of that story, the support services that we mentioned experienced enormous increases in their volume of calls. For John Sudos, being able to talk about it has made all the difference. He now speaks openly about his condition with his friends, family and members of the community. We were very, very grateful for the rural men who stepped forward, the dignity that they had in doing that for us, and the humour as well. I remember the farmer we spoke to in Victoria asked us if he could, was it possible to look at our raw tapes of what we'd shot, and I said, oh, look, we usually don't, but maybe we could help you through with that. And he said, oh, because you filmed me when I was practicing my lawn bowls and I want to see what my action's like on the camera. So I said, that we can do, definitely we can do.
In Australian agriculture, there's always someone selling or promoting the next big thing.
Wow, 30 years. What an achievement, what an accomplishment. I feel so blessed to have been part of the Landline team as a host and a reporter back in the day. And yeah, well done, 30 years, may there be many, many more.
Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joanne Shoebridge. Landline for me was about people, the great people I worked with, the country people who trusted us to tell their story, and my people. It was on a Landline assignment that I met my husband Greg, and we have 3 beautiful children, Johnny, Katie and Chloe Jo. So thank you Landline and happy birthday.
Where are your legs?
Jump them.
should have done your homework before you got out of here. I mean, you know, it's a little bit late now.
Cramming, Jumbuck. Haven't you ever done it? I guess like most rural families, I grew up with Landline being akin to the Holy Trinity in our house. It was the program you don't miss on Sundays. Dad calls it church.
Our job is pretty cool, Jumbuck.
I still pinch myself. I still feel like, how the heck did I end up getting such a good gig in life?
Hello, you slack lot of shits. How you going?
73-year-old Dickie runs the Aileron Roadhouse, which is roughly 200 kilometres north of Alice Springs.
We get access to such huge characters that you would not find anywhere else in the world, I'm sure of it.
Laughter is the best medicine. Some people haven't got it in them, but that's all right.
One of the great characters we met was Ralph Affleck, who built a sawmill that he can operate himself. He did it when he was 85. The man's brain, he's a genius. He would be in another life working for NASA, I'm sure. How many fingers have you got? How many toes?
I got 9 toes and I got 10 fingers. I chopped one off with a pinch bar one time. Went straight through the top of my boot. My brand new boots. I thought, oh my God, what a stupid thing to do now. I've ruined a pair of new boots.
I think it's the variety of stories that we get to tell that actually keeps me here. Because one minute we can be looking at an industry, the next we can be digging into a huge rural issue. And then we get to tell those golden small community yarns, and sometimes they're my very favourites. For a century, windmills have been the lifeblood of Penong, on the edge of the Nullarbor Plain.
All good, all good.
And now, a group of locals is preserving this important part of the town's history.
Let's go. One more bit of treasure.
They look good, they're all different, they're all got their own little moans and groans and whatever. We know every nut and bolt in every mill.
Here's cheers to the windmills, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Community spirit is at the heart of so many of our stories. You know, whether it's in times of drought or despair, or just a town doing something fun.
The Chinchilla Melon Festival was one of the funniest events I've ever covered. They really turn a watermelon into a superstar for a weekend, and it brings people into the town, makes people laugh, but also lets people know this is what we grow and it's fantastic. But there was one event there which we probably couldn't show now. It was a Miss Melons competition, and yes, if you're thinking, yes, you're correct. And I didn't get a Guernsey.
Pip Courtney has reported on the highs and lows of life on the land at a time of enormous change.
You're the first media that's even taken the time to ask our opinion or our side.
What keeps you guys going? Each other, our friends, our daughters, a lot of support. Now,
Now you gotta go.
Country hospitality is legendary, but also what country people do is when someone's in trouble, they pitch in. And I was on the receiving end of this extraordinary hospitality and care and love when John died, and I had offers of accommodation. Somebody offered me a horse that I'd admired at their property when we were filming with John. I had farmer baked brownies and Zen and his wife said he'd never cooked anything for her. I had boxes of apples from an apple grower turn up where John and I had filmed. I heard from people who watched the show who I've never met. I heard from people who I'd filmed with John. I really felt like I was part of rural Australia's family, and they still ask how I'm doing, and I just love them right back.
Everybody loves Landline, especially me, with enormous respect, admiration, affection. Its influence has been extraordinary.
The biggest happy 30th birthday to the amazing team at Landline and to one of my journo heroes, Pip Courtney.
From everyone at the Isle of Sea, we'd like to wish Landline a happy 30th birthday.
and we look forward to 30 more years of storytelling from the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community.
1 year after the High Court handed down its historic decision establishing the concept of native title in the law of the land, confusion and uncertainty still dominates the debate.
Land rights was a very big issue right at the start because nobody knew what it meant.
Do people on the land, primary producers, have anything to be afraid of?
There seems to be a tendency amongst some elements that Aboriginal people are going to be unreasonable in their demands, but that's far from the truth in my experience.
People like Father Frank Brennan and Mick Dodson, they were amazing. The way that they presented their case was in a very even-handed way that was not going to frighten farmers. We're coming to get your land. It wasn't that at all. It was like, this is how we can coexist, and that's what it's all about. It's about the recognition.
Indigenous people have used fire for thousands of years, right up until settlement, when traditional ways started to ebb away. That's changing.
There's been a whole renewed urgency and respect for traditional practices in land management, and we're really seeing that at the moment with fire management.
This is Roebuck Plains Station in the West Kimberley. Here on Yaru land, Indigenous people are taking back the reins.
It's our country, and we know about as good as anybody else the nature of what's required to run our business.
It's so important to capture the story of Indigenous stockmen and Indigenous pastoralists and what they're doing here, because it does show other young people that there is a pathway that they can choose, and they get to see their people proud and strong and tough and doing extraordinary things.
We all learn from each other. We're not all best at everything. At the end of the day, yeah, it's a good feeling going back home to the station, knowing that you did a good day's work at the end of the day. So a bit naked, but that's ringing life.
That's the beauty of what we do, is we're collecting this amazing tapestry of characters and people that really become part of us.
The ABC Radio 1997 Australian Rural Woman of the Year is Tasmania's Jane Bennett.
One of the great things is being able to watch the progression of the careers of the women who've won the Rural Woman of the Year award and to see what it's done for them. And Jane Bennett sticks in my mind.
The Jane Bennett that so impressed the judges is a cheesemaker.
I really believe in agriculture, and I want to see a great future for our industry, and I think that the best way to ensure that is to become involved and participate. So yeah, I'm a bit obsessed, I guess.
When I first started, very few women would say, I'm a farmer. And if they did, somebody would say, what? You're a farmer's wife, love. Come on. Now, women happily say they're farmers. No one questions it. It's not seen as odd or unusual. It's just part of the fabric of rural life.
It's all about working smart and not hard.
Once, it was considered that the dumb kids stayed on the farm, the smart ones went off. That's really changed around now.
Within about a 5-year period, we've had probably 20 young, educated people who want to farm come to KI. Farming's a great career, it's a great job. And there's a fantastic science behind everything that happens on a farm.
I'm always staggered by how sophisticated a lot of the people who are in agriculture are in terms of their understanding and use of technology. Tractors now are immense, gargantuan, whereas once they might have been as big as a vehicle. And the sophistication is just tenfold or more than what it used to be.
In West Australia's wheat belt, airline pilot Yale Simpson is enjoying the feel of terra firma and the rumble of a 16-ton harvester.
They're quite impressed by it. I think they didn't understand the level of technology that we actually use in our machinery these days. The only thing that's probably lacking for them is the fact that they just can't press ding and get a coffee.
The thing that's amazed me since we started is the ability of the Australian farmer to become more and more efficient.
In this high-tech plant breeding centre, the search is on for hardy crops which will produce more from less.
We're able to do things that haven't been possible before.
The range of crops or the varieties that are grown now compared to 30 years ago, it's just so different. And you've got these scientists who beaver away for years and years to come up with one new variety. They are the unsung heroes of ag.
Landline, I think your following now is even stronger than it's ever been. And that's because you're able to tell the story of farming and rural and regional communities in a way that's not just appreciated by the people who live there, but also by the people in urban communities.
I've learned a lot about rural Australia from Landline. Innovative communities and farmers, great presenters telling unforgettable stories. Thank you and congratulations Landline for 30 years of memorable television.
Every day I get up and I look out and I think I'm the luckiest person in the world. My office is as far as my eye can see.
It doesn't come much simpler than a line with a hook on the end of it. There's no mechanical gear. It's all bicep power and there's no net.
One thing I've learned is that people in the bush can spot a fraud a mile away, so you've got to be authentic, and fishing is something that I'm authentically interested in.
This is what we dream of, coming on the beach in the morning, seeing the school like that and hitting the net around it, you know.
You've got 100 tonne of fish sitting there tailing at you. It's a good sight.
The salmon are running on the west coast, but the men who catch them may be running out of time. It wasn't long after I joined Landline that I realised that professional fishing didn't really have much of a voice. It's hard to believe that beautiful big fish like these end up as lobster bait and are worth only 45 cents a kilo here on the beach. It may be that they're worth much more to the West Australian economy as a sports fish. The question, though, is whether the two sectors, commercial and recreational, can coexist.
Hello, I'm Pip Courtney in Shanghai. One thing farmers love doing is looking over the fence to see what their neighbours are up to. And we've been lucky enough as reporters to travel around the world telling stories.
There is nothing like this back home. The scale is simply breathtaking.
In this young nation where the average wage is just $1 per day, something like this is helping to break the chains of hunger.
This is Italy's richest city and arguably its most image-driven.
Our trip to Europe in the late 90s was an extraordinary eye-opener for Aussie farmers because, of course, the level of subsidies are huge. I mean, it's a God-given right over there. And it just shows how productive Aussie farmers really are.
30 years worth of service to the bush and 30 years worth of stories. And if this bloody COVID has taught us one thing, is that decentralisation to the bush is possible. So we look forward to the ABC moving out to Cloncurry. Either the first rounds of Chardonnays are on me.
And Pip Courtney, you are a treasure and an ornament to the bush. You keep up the good work too, don't ever leave us.
It's always been a great show, one of the best filmed shows on the ABC, and it is so respected in the bush where, of course, Pip Courtney's hat has its own following.
Oh, let's go.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Landline. One day we were out here and it was blowing a gale. We'd been here for 2 hours and I think we had one take. So I said, it's time to pull out the Akubra, and the boys went, you can't wear it, it's banned. And I said, well, we've just got to get the job done. And I'm the world's worst hairdresser. We're dealing with the wind, the hat just worked, and now I'm the lady in the hat, and I can go to an event with a long dress on at night, and people say, where's your hat?
Well, I don't know whether it's good news or bad news, and I'm afraid nothing too encouraging to report price-wise. Well, the cattle market...
But I think up there in equal measure are the comments and the mystery of Kerry's hair. Really, not a week went by without someone writing, or in later days, social media comments about how does Kerry manage to keep his hair so black? It couldn't be real.
Bush Australia's... I once got a phone call. He said, mate, I've got a bet with my mate. mate in the bar here $100 that you don't dye your hair. I said, well, I don't. And he said, I need a stat deck to get the monies. So I had to go to my old mate Steve Ackery, the hairdresser, to do a stat deck to say that I don't own the hair. I faxed it out to him and he sent me a note saying, I've collected the 100, thank you very much, and I don't do my hair, thank you very much.
Are you ready for Terry's commodities?
The markets are an intrinsic part of what farmers and graziers are all about. I mean, the farmer's optimism depends on two things. When's it going to rain and what are the prices like?
You have permission to do this? You're intruding on my privacy, Mr. Taylor.
You're in television, Terry.
Rarely does it combine when the prices are up and it's raining. Rarely. But when it happens, it's heaven on a stick for farmers and graziers.
We started all on 2 and then when the prices start coming in, go to number 1. I've been with the country hour now for 14 years and I'll be honest, I would always binge watch the commodities report because often what was mentioned on that I'd steal for the next week's country hour on many occasions. So the big question is, what will cattle prices do in the year of the ox? The legendary Kerry Lonigan tweeted the other day that nothing fixes high prices like high prices. Every time Kerry called me on a Friday to pick my brains, as he was getting ready to record his segment, massive highlight of the week it was. Never thought that I'd be on the other side, so it's a bit daunting, but it's exciting.
We have a rule here, no hay pickups, no interruptions between 12 and 2, so we can watch Landline every week.
Happy 30th birthday, Landline!
To the show that doesn't age, Landline, happy 30th. Happy birthday, Landline, from Collyambly, New South Wales.
We watch the show every week. Let's hope you're around for another 30 years.
Happy birthday, Landline!
I grew up in the city, but I love watching Landline ever since I was a kid. Happy 30th birthday, Landline.
Landline's ability to get into city homes has been remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. Most of our audience, in fact, if you count the number of people who watch Landline every Sunday, they are in Sydney and Melbourne, Brisbane, etc., Adelaide, Perth, in the city, in the inner city sometimes. They love it. They may not agree with us all the time, but they love us.
The enterprise has actually made us better farmers.
This is not a fad. We're getting back to making real food.
Out of all the crops that we grow, everyone wants to talk to me about kale.
I think 30 years ago, if you'd told a farmer you're a food producer first, a farmer second, he or she might have laughed at you. Now it's very front of mind.
Added to that, there's now a well-being sector of the market. Meat alternatives, plant-based, veganism, gluten-free, that sort of thing. They're obviously not beef patties.
They're vegan, yeah.
And that's not cheese. What is it? This Vegans Picnic is more than just about the food. The people here are all committed animal activists.
This is my life. Trying to prevent and trying to educate the public about the exploitation of animals.
There's no doubt there's been a lot of scrutiny on agriculture brought about by the emergence of animal welfare groups, radical animal welfare groups. These distressing images released by Animals Australia last April sparked national outrage.
I feel a villain in the debate in the media, which I'm really unhappy about, because it's in our interest to keep the stock in good order and alive and well fed and watered.
Farmers always produce livestock carefully and humanely, but now it's really front of mind. I think things like the 2011 Indonesian live cattle crisis was a real wake-up call.
Last night I ordered the complete suspension of all livestock exports to Indonesia for the purposes of slaughter.
When the ABC's Four Corners program broadcast evidence and highly gruesome footage of Australian cattle being subjected to barbarous treatment in Indonesian abattoirs, Australia's live export trade was plunged into chaos and crisis. It didn't matter that the cruelty was confined to a few facilities. The images shattered the belief that Australian cattle were humanely slaughtered.
It was a huge shock, and everything, our world stopped.
the consumer backlash, if you could call it that, that's grown in the last 30 odd years. And the live cattle trade ban was the knee-jerk reaction was silly, and the courts have proved it since. But there are reasons why we send live cattle to Indonesia, and they all relate to custom and the lack of electricity. They can't store the meat in the fridge.
I think it's so important that Landline has helped keep the perception and the reality of farming at the forefront of our conscience in this country.
The reality of farming can make people uncomfortable. Things like abattoirs, intensive operations. But we do those stories because that is the reality of what paddock to plate actually is. I think sometimes that phrase is idealised a little bit, like you see something lovely in the paddock and you see something lovely on the plate, but you don't see much of what goes on in the middle. And on Landline, we show you the whole lot.
Commercial artificial insemination has so far proven elusive in the alpaca world, mostly because of the complex way in which they conceive.
The boys, they all vary a little bit. Some mate as quick as 5 minutes, some go for half an hour. And when we have them all going, it's sort of a bit of a competition thing. I can go longer than you can type of attitude. But anyway, boys will be boys.
Well, it's all part of the animal kingdom and the farming process.
There are moves to make this more of a year-round thing, rather than just a festive fair.
In here is a fish that's over a metre long and 20 years old. Her name's Flossie. Let's see if we can find her. One of the fun challenges of working on Landline is dealing with all the animals. I love going to properties where they've got farm dogs and then seeing what special dog a farmer has. The dog that gets to sit in the front passenger seat while all the workers are in the back. My dirty little secret is I love cats. And while not many farmers think cats are great, last year we finally got a cat in a story, and I still owe the cameraman a slab of beer.
How's the mood back there?
They're very happy campers right now. Just seeing the boys do their bush mechanic style tinkering.
It's not a day on the road, boys. Yeah.
I think I can honestly say that I am the OH&S people in the ABC's least favourite reporter.
Any crocs?
Hope not. We are working in a really different part of the world. It's still pretty last frontier in some respects, and you do get to go on some pretty hairy adventures.
She's driving, something could happen.
We really have to fend for ourselves, and I tell you what, we've had it all thrown at us.
You're still alive?
You're not living unless you're kind of a little bit scared, I suppose.
Be a slow old drive home, I think.
And we just love being out there. We sort of throw off the shackles as we head out of town, and we think, oh, thank God we're back on the road.
There we go.
Cheers, buddy.
No worries. What do you think? She doesn't like her, I can tell.
No, I do actually.
Is it okay?
Yeah, I do like it. It's a lot better than the way Mum used to make it. Sorry, Mum.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Enjoy.
That is disgusting, isn't it? That is really terrible. We have filmed in some fantastic places where they've been cooking, on campfires, in remote areas, in farm kitchens, in orchards. We basically are pulling the produce off the tree and having a go at it, in the orchard. Or it can be with celebrity chefs in some of the top restaurants.
It's been a pleasure to work with Landline over the years. I love it, I watch it every week, and I hope they're here for a long time to come. Happy birthday.
30 years of putting such a lens onto the life of those on the land. The beauty, the hardships, and the innovation, and all that comes out of that.
Landline, thank you so much for telling the stories of rural Australia and farmers with such depth and integrity. And to do it for 30 years deserves the hugest congratulations.
Look at that. That is epic.
Great for social and YouTube.
I was drawn to the program in 1991 because it appealed to that core of me that was my connection to the country. And it appealed to me again, you know, like 28 years later. Would you like to come back and be the executive producer of the show for a while? Well, yes, I would, because it's still a part of me, and when I hear that theme play, my heart still lifts.
Hey John, my name's Helena from ABC TV. How are you today?
30 years ago, none of us knew what our digital future was going to be.
And I think it'd be really good online too.
Okay. A short form?
One Landline story then has another 5 or 6 lives on other platforms.
This is a good story and the world needs to see it, John.
My vision for Landline is for it to be as relevant in the future as what it is today.
I did my job and I appreciated so much all those good people that worked for me. I'm proud that I started something that worked. The Way's old head I used to work for in television said the definition of a successful program is it runs 7 years. Well, after we'd run 4 or 5 years, I think we'll almost make it anyway. Here we are, 30 years later. So, yeah.
At this time of year, but there seems to be a lack of